fixed. So we have a lot to go through tonight. This is our last week, and we're not going to get all the way through 25, but we're going to get to the part of 25 that we need to get to. But I wanted to back up a little bit and talk a little bit more about why Abraham was so adamant that he did not want Isaac to marry a Canaanite woman. And it goes beyond the fact that the Canaanites were cursed because they are the sons of Ham, and Ham was cursed way back. So, but it has to do also with the fact that because they're cursed, they also did not believe in one God. They believed in multiple gods. They had a lot of different deities. And in 2 Corinthians, I gave you, this is just two different versions of the same verse. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, it says, "Do not be mismatched with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and lawlessness share together? Or what does light have to do in common with darkness? Or what harmony does Christ have with Belial? Or what does a believer share with an unbeliever? Or what agreement does the temple of God have with idols? For we are the temple of the living God, just as God said, I will dwell among them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." And the reason I gave you the King James Version, I'm going to explain this in just a second, but the reason I gave you the King James Version also is I kind of like the way the King James Version says it, because it says, "Be ye not unequally yoked together." And it's kind of like it's referring to a farming term. If you're going to plow a field with animals, whether it be cattle or horses or ox, you need them equally yoked. You wouldn't yoke an adult male ox with a baby ox per se, because they're not going to pull equally. And because they're not going to pull equally, they're always fighting against each other, and it's hard to even go in a straight line if you're doing that. And that's what Abraham was concerned about with Isaac, is if you marry someone who is not equally yoked with you, from a godly perspective, you're always going to have this battle back and forth between the two of you. And we've seen this. Brenda and I, we had friends in Cincinnati that they were not equally yoked, and they fought all the time. They fought on everything. They fought on one of them was Jewish and one of them was a Christian, and they were married. And they fought about what their religion was going to be, how they were going to raise their kids, how they were going to discipline their kids. It just seemed like they were always unequally yoked, and they fought and they fought and they fought. I don't even know if they're together anymore. But it was just a battle all the time. And he was a non-religious Jew. So he was Jewish, but more of a secular Jew. But he wanted nothing to do with church. And there was just this constant unequal yoking that was going on. And Abraham doesn't want that for Isaac, because Isaac is the child of promise. So he did not want that. And that's another reason why he was so adamant about that. But in verse 10, and this is chapter 24, it says, and I'm backing up a little bit just to remind us of where we were at. This is after Abraham made his servant promise that he would go find a wife for Isaac, and that he would not find a wife among the Canaanites. It says, "Then the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master, and went out with a variety of good things of his master's in his hand. So he set out and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water when it was evening, the time when women would go out to draw water. And he said, Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today, and show kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now may it be that the young woman to whom I say, please let down your jar so that I may drink, and who answers, drink, and I will water your camels also, may she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. And by this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. You notice what he didn't say? Please have a beautiful woman come to the well. He didn't say that. He also didn't say, please have a young woman come to the well. He just said, whoever you choose, God, have them show me this sign so that I will know that this is the person. So to put this in a map, the city of Nahor, which, if you recall, Nahor is Abraham's father, but also Abraham's brother. All right, so the father, and then it's one of the first sons, so he named the son Nahor also. Okay, so it's a father and a brother. But the city of Nahor, if you recall, several chapters back in our study, the first place that Abram went is from Ur of the Chaldeans down here up to the city of his father, which was Haran. All right, so this is where they're going. So they're starting way down here. This is where Abraham lives now, down here at the red X by the desert. And they're going all the way up there. It's over 400 miles that they're traveling, which is why they're taking 10 camels. And it's a big trip. It's probably a 20-day journey there and a 20-day journey back by foot. So it's a long journey. So another thing that I wanted to point out, and I'll get there in just a minute. We'll do that next. In verse 15, it says, and it came about, before he had finished speaking to God, before he had finished his prayer, that behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother, Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The young woman was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had relations with her. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her. He's probably thinking, please, Lord, let this be the woman. She's beautiful. Isaac's going to be happy with this woman. But that's not what he asked for. But he ran and he said, please let me drink a little water from your jar. And she said, drink, my lord. Then she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will also draw water for your camels until they have finished drinking. That's what he asked for a sign. So he knew Rebekah is the one. Now, one thing that I wanted to point out here is you have camels. He has 10 camels with him. This is not the way you water a camel, okay? So a camel that has been traveling across the desert, one camel can drink 30 to 50 gallons of water at a time. So when she says, I will draw water for your camels also, she's running back and forth and getting water and back and getting water and back. Because usually they water camels with a huge trough because they drink an enormous amount of water so they can travel all the way across the desert without drinking. So they drink a lot of water. You know, when you think I'll water your camels, you're thinking this. You're not thinking 30 gallons of water. But a camel will drink 30 gallons of water. So that's why I think that's why he put that in there, because who's going to offer to water the camels? Because they just keep drinking and drinking and drinking and they don't stop. So just to kind of show you where we're at with our lineage is you have Haran up here. See, Nahor is actually Abraham's father, and then the land of Haran. But Nahor, the grandson of Abraham's father, this is the Nahor we're talking about now, Nahor and Milcah. And you can see that Rebekah is down here, Bethuel's daughter, Rebekah. Okay? And just to point it out, you can see I've got them circled just so you can follow it. But basically, that's the Nahor and Milcah that we're talking about, and that's where Rebekah falls into that line, into that lineage. So God is blessing the extended family of Abraham also through this action right here. As he's extending this blessing to the extended family of Abraham. And verse 20. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all of his camels. So she got water, put it in the trough. Got water, put it in the trough. Got water, put it in the trough. Meanwhile, the man was taking a close look at her in silence. So the which this is Eliezer of Damascus. This was the servant of Abraham. He is taking a close look at her to make sure this is the one that God has chosen, to find out whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. And then it says, when the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her wrists weighing 10 shekels in gold. So a shekel is a half ounce. So he gave her 10 shekels of gold. So he gave her 5 ounces of gold. Modern day value, about $22,000 in gold. Mm-hmm. Plus he gave her a half shekel gold ring in her nose. You think gold ring here, but it's gonna explain this later, that it's actually a gold ring in her nose. It was a thing back then. And he said, whose daughter are you? See, he knew nothing about her, but he has already decided, God has blessed us. This is the wife for Isaac, even though he knows nothing about her. And she knows nothing about Isaac, okay? She knows nothing about what's going on at all so far. But he said, whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for us to stay overnight at your father's house? She said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, Milcah's son, whom she bore to Nahor. Again she said to him, we have plenty of both straw and feed and room to stay overnight. So what are the chances in this populated area that the person that comes to the well is Rebecca, who is in the line of the family, who is the daughter of Bethuel, and Bethuel is the son of Nahor and Milcah? So what are your chances of that being the case? Are you having issues again?
Yeah, we're freezing.
Pause your OneDrive. See if your OneDrive is trying to connect to you again. Just shut it down. Please hold for a minute.
Can you come here and do that?
Yep, I'll be right there. Okay, let's see if that helps. Just have somebody tell you if this is better. Is that better now?
I'm just waiting.
Okay. Hopefully. I guess I have to move, otherwise it looks
Rayanne
like...
says better for now.
Better for now, okay, all right. So we're just gonna leave that off for 2 hours. Okay. All right, so then he asked, just again at the bottom, again she said to him, we have plenty of both straw and feed and room to stay overnight. Any questions so far, other than the connection issue that
That they didn't hear half the...
seem to be having? They couldn't hear it either? Okay. All right, so as we move on, hopefully we're connected good. You can see down at the bottom here, we have Rebecca has a brother named Laban. And Laban, I'm just going to give you a little background because you're going to see how he comes into the story next. Laban is a manipulator and a fairly greedy person. Okay, and we're going to see that later on in Genesis, but it helps for us for tonight to know that that's Laban's character. He's a bit of a manipulator, and when he sees money, he's all about that. So he's a fairly greedy person, and you're going to see that right away here. It helps us fill in a few blanks as we move forward. So in verse 26, then the man bowed low and worshiped the Lord. So this is Abraham's servant, worshiped the Lord. And he said, blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and his trustworthiness towards his master, or toward my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brothers. So he knows he's at his master's brother's house. The Lord has guided him there. Then the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. And Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists. And when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah saying, "This is what the man said to me," he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, "Come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? Since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." So now he's being super nice to him. Being really nice because he's seen the ring, he has seen the ring, he's seen the bracelets, he has seen that this man has wealth with him. So now the greed is kicking in here. So the man entered the house. Then Laban unloaded the camels, and he gave straw and feed to the camels, and water to wash his feet, and the feet of the men who were with him. But when food was set before him to eat, he said, "I will not eat until I have stated my business." And he said, "Speak on." So what's going to happen next, and I'm going to read through it. We've already seen most of this story. It's almost a repeat of everything we've done so far. It's a repeat of the story. He's telling the story to Laban and Laban's father and his mother is who he's telling the story to. And he said in verse 34, "So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master so that he has become rich, and he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and slave women and camels and donkeys." I think this is reaching right in. I don't think that Eliezer of Damascus knows that how this is going to affect them, but he's dealing with greedy people here. So they're hearing this. My master is wealthy, and he has all this wealth, and he has all these animals, and he has all these servants, and that's just priming their ears for what they're hearing. And it says, "Now my master's wife Sarah bore a son to my master in her old age, and he has given him all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son. Then I said to my master, Suppose the woman does not follow me. And he said to me, The Lord before whom I have walked will send his angel with you to make your journey successful, and you will take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my relatives, and if they do not give her to you, you will be free from my oath." So this is exactly what we talked about last week. It's just a recouping of everything. "So I came today to the spring and said, Lord, God of my master Abraham, if now you will make my journey on which I have been going successful, behold, I am standing by the spring, and may it be that the young unmarried woman who comes out to draw water, and to whom I say, Please let me drink a little water from your jar, and she says to me, You drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son." And it says, "Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder and went down to the spring and drew water. And I said to her, Please let me drink. She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, Drink, and I will water your camels also. So I drank, and she watered the camels also. Then I asked her and said, Whose daughter are you? And she said, The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put a ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. And I bowed low and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had guided me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's brother for his son. So now, if you are going to deal kindly and truthfully with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me now, so that I may turn to the right or to the left." I find it interesting that we've already seen this entire story. And now we're recouping the whole thing again. And I always say, when God repeats himself, it's important. I think it's very important that God has chosen Rebekah as Isaac's wife. And that's a very important point that God is making, so much so that he's repeating himself in it. He's saying it again. The entire story, we just got the entire story again recounted to us. And this is how they respond. So if you heard this and you said, we need to take your daughter, she's going to be the wife of my master, Isaac, and I'm going to take her to a faraway land, how would you respond? Wouldn't you question a few things and think, gee, I wonder, should we let him have her? I mean, but they're seeing the wealth. They're seeing what they're putting. They've heard the story. And next is how they respond. They said, then Laban and Bethuel replied, the matter has come from the Lord, so we cannot speak to you bad or good. Here is Rebekah before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. That's simple. I don't know. Maybe they thought differently back then than we think nowadays, but I don't think if somebody came to my house today and said, hey, we want your daughter and we're going to take her 400 miles away, that I would just say, I guess it's the Lord's will, take her and go. I mean, I would have a whole lot more questions to ask, but they really don't see that. They don't really see that that's the case. So, and it says, when Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. Are we still having issues?
I don't think so.
Okay. Bow himself down before the Lord, and the servant brought out articles of silver and articles of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. So he brought out more wealth. He brought out silver, he brought out gold, he brought out garments and gave them to Rebekah. But then he also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. So he's sharing the wealth, all these things that he brought with him on this journey. He's sharing all of those things with Rebekah's family, as I think they thought he might do. It says, then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. When they got up in the morning, he said, send me away to my master. So the thing that I don't see so far, and we're going to see this in just a minute, where does Rebekah have a choice in this? So far, I've seen Abraham's servant bring wealth to the people and give Rebekah gold and silver and articles and garments and all these things. But I haven't heard anybody say, not yet. I have not heard them say, Rebekah, is this what you want? That's what I would ask my daughter. Is this what you want? But I think they're so enamored by the wealth that is coming through Abraham to them. And it is a relative of theirs. It's not like he's a complete stranger, because Abraham is their relative, that they're willing to let her go. But here's the but. But her brother and her mother said, let the young woman stay with us for a few days, say 10. Afterwards she may go. However, he said to them, this is Eliezer talking now, do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away so that I may go to my master. And they said, we will call the young woman and ask her. So they're going to now ask Rebekah after all of this. Then they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. All right. Put yourself in Rebekah's shoes for a minute here. You know nothing about Isaac. All you know is that this guy shows up at your well, and he has 10 camel with him and some people with him, and you give them water, and you give their camel water, and they give you gold and silver and wealth as a result, and now they want to take you away 400 miles away, and you're like, sure, I'll go.
And you don't know what he looks like.
She knows nothing about him. She has not asked one question, nor have they told her anything about him. They haven't said, well, he's a young man. They didn't say, well, he could have been 90 years old. They didn't know. She didn't ask anything, and they didn't tell her anything. But Lord willing, she was willing to follow what the Lord wanted. I think she could feel that providence of the Lord in this, because why else would you say, yes, I'll go? Without knowing anything about this person, knowing that this is going to be your husband, and that's the way it is. But she was willing to go. So she said, I will go. So they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them. How would they know to even say that? How would they? They must know, because they just, I don't know how they would know that. But may our sister become thousands of 10,000s. How would they know what God's promise was to Abraham? because we don't see that in the text where he told them this, other than the Lord. So we're gonna move now. So now they have Rebekah. They're traveling back to Isaac, down in the desert. Now I've got a map here. They're traveling back down here. They're way, if this map continued, they'd be way up here on the map. But they're down here. This is where Isaac is. And Isaac is visiting Beer Lahai Roi. That is the well of the living one who sees me. Do you remember back about 10 chapters ago when Ishmael and Hagar left because they were being mistreated by Sarah? They went to this exact place. And they went there, and that's where the angel of the Lord came to them and said, you need to go back. Okay? And she said, and she called the Lord El Roi, the one who sees me. And that's what she called the place. And you can see it says here in verse 61, then Rebekah got up with her female attendants, and they mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac had come back from a journey to Beer Lahai Roi. So he had been visiting that place where Ishmael and his mom was at. And there's a well there, and they live in the desert, so maybe he was just going to the well. But he was visiting there, for he was living in Negev, which is right down here. The Negev desert, if you can see that on the screen, it's kind of low. But the Negev desert down at the bottom. And this is where the Beer Lahai Roi is at. Pronouncing it the best I can, sorry. So in verse 63, Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening, and he raised his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. I love that part. He sees the camels. He doesn't see anybody else. He sees the camels coming. Camels were coming. Rebekah raised her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. She said to the servant, who is that man walking in the field to meet us? Didn't know anything about him. Had no idea who he was. And the servant said, he is my master. Then she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So he was living in his mother's tent. See that? Even though his mother had passed away. Remember we talked about that last week, that Sarah had passed away, and she's already been buried. So she came and she comforted him after his mother's death. I didn't put a place for questions here, but are there any questions so far? Does anybody have any questions? All right. So in Genesis 25, it says, so this is quite a few years after Sarah had passed away, okay? Abraham lived for another, I think it was 38 years after Sarah passed away. So he took another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan fathered Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Asherim, Letushim, and Leumim. Anybody want to give a shot at these names? The sons of Midian were Epher, Hanok, Abida, and Eldah. All of these were the sons of Keturah. Now Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. So he gave everything to Isaac. But to the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land to the east. Abraham knows that his life is drawing to an end. He's giving his things away. He gave all of his stuff to his son Isaac, and he gave things to the other people as well that are on this list. He gave them all something. And And Midian is an interesting place because it's going to show up later in Genesis also. Because when Moses kills the Egyptian for abusing an Israelite, he runs to Midian. This Midian settled in Persia or Iraq area, that kind of area there. And that's where he runs to. That's where Moses runs off to get away. So this kind of made me start thinking, Abraham is in a phase of his life, and this is not my schedule. This isn't in your notes, but this is kind of my thing. The 7 phases of a man's life. It could also be the 7 phases of a woman's life, okay? And this is not mine. I got this somewhere else, but I think it's interesting. You start out in life with spills, and then drills, where you learn things, thrills, bills, ills, pills, and then wills. Okay? So this is the phase of his life that Abraham's in. He's in the will phase of his life, where he's giving away his possessions, and he knows that his life is drawing to an end. And one thing I wanted to say that's really important, not all death is bad. Because when you've lived a full life and you've done all the things that you want to do in your life, sometimes our bodies start to fail us, even though maybe our minds and our hearts want to continue to do other things, but our bodies start to fail. And there's something that I wanted to point out that just came as I was in this study, when it talked about a tent, that he lived in his mother's tent. You know, God, when he's with the Israelites, later on, he has them build a tabernacle, which is a tent, which is a temporary dwelling place for the Holy Spirit. And God prescribed it that way because the tent was intended to be temporary. God never set up his permanent dwelling on this earth. He would visit them in a tent as a temporary place because God's permanent dwelling is in heaven. Now later on, David comes along and he says, you need a permanent place to be. So he sanctions a temple, which ultimately David's son Solomon builds the temple. But God never told him, I need you to build a permanent place for me on this earth, because God always looked at his dwelling place on this earth as a temporary place. That was the Old Testament under the Old Covenant. New Testament, under Jesus Christ, we have a new covenant. But I want to show you something in 2 Corinthians. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, it says, for we know that our earthly tent, which is our house, the house of our spirit, okay? So your body is a temporary tent for your spirit. Your spirit lives forever, but not in your current body, not in my current body, not in any of ours. And it says, for we know that if our earthly tent, which is our house, is torn down, we have a building from God, a house not made by hands, eternal in the heavens. For indeed, in this tent we groan. The longer we live in this body, okay, and I can tell you this from personal experience, and those who are older than me probably can too, the longer we live in this body, doesn't our body kind of groan a bit? When you get up in the morning, you go, oh gosh, I'm tight, my legs are stiff, my back hurts. We groan, right? So it says, for indeed, in this tent we groan, longing to be clothed with our dwelling from heaven. Since in fact, after putting it on, we will not be found naked. For indeed, we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, being burdened because we do not want to be unclothed, but to be clothed, so that what is mortal will be swallowed up by life. Now he who prepared us for this very purpose is God, who gave us the Spirit as a pledge. He's going to describe it a little further here so we understand what he's talking about. Therefore, you always have to ask, what is the therefore? Here's the therefore. Being always of good courage, and knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. So as long as we're in this body, Our soul is absent from the Lord because the Lord, his dwelling, his permanent dwelling is not here. His Holy Spirit is with us, but this is not the permanent place of the Lord. It says, for we walk by faith, not by sight. But we are of good courage and prefer rather to be absent from the body and to be at home with the Lord. Absent from the body is present with the Lord. That's something we say at funerals a lot of times. Because when our spirit is finally released from this temporary tent that we live in, we will be at home with the Lord in our permanent place. And it says, therefore, we also have as our ambition, whether at home or absent, to be pleasing to him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive compensation for his deeds done through the body, in accordance with what he has done, whether good or bad. Now, that means there is a time of accountability. And sometimes we don't think about this as we go through our daily life in these temporary tents that we have, is there comes a time that we are judged according to our deeds. Now, if you have put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, he has declared you righteous. That's the new covenant. You are going to heaven, but you are still going to be looked at as what were your deeds when you were on earth? And what are those rewards that we're going to get or not receive because of certain things? But we will be in heaven. So a lot of times we don't look at our body as a tent. We look at our body as our permanent place, and I want to live forever, and I dread dying, and I'm afraid to die. But the reality is, this is a tent. It was always intended to be a tent. At some point, we will be separated from this tent, and our spirit lives on. That's the part we have to keep in mind, is absent from the body is present with the Lord. For anyone, so how would I describe a bad death? The way I would describe a bad death is if you die on this earth and you haven't placed your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. Because now, absent from the body is separated from the Lord, if that's what happens. If you haven't put your faith and trust in Jesus, absent from the body now means separated from the Lord. That's a terrible thing. So the number one most important thing that we can do while we are in this tent is figure out what we're going to do with Jesus and put our faith and trust in him, because then absent from the body is present with the Lord. We get to our permanent dwelling place. And that's why I said, not all deaths are bad. Abraham, and we're going to see this in a minute, where Abraham goes when he dies, because it tells us in the text that we're going to run across here, is he is not gone, okay? And it says it right here, and this is in your notes. These are all the years of Abraham's life that he lived, 175 years. Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, an old man and satisfied with life, and he was gathered to his people. See that part? He was gathered to his people. He is absent from his earthly tent, but he is with his other righteous people that God declared righteous. See, righteousness was important back then, just like it is now. We just have a different way that we get there now. We have a different covenant that they had. They had to believe on God, and God accounted it to them. It said this earlier with Abraham. Abraham believed God, and God counted it to him as righteousness. You're right with me because you believe me. It's the same way with Jesus. If we believe in Jesus, and we place our faith and trust in Jesus, and we're right with Jesus, then he declares us righteous. And we get the same thing that Abraham got when he died, is we're gathered to our people. Who are our people? We know who some of Abraham's people were, but who are our people? Our people are those who did the same thing before us. If they put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ and they died, then we know where they're at. They're absent from their tent, and they're in their permanent place with God. when we die, we will be, if we have put our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, just like the people before us, then we will be gathered to our people. So I don't know about you, but that gives me comfort in knowing that someday we will be gathered to our people. Now, Abraham died at a good old age of 175 years old, okay? Do you realize none of this really even started with Abraham until he was like 75, 85 years old? So think about that. None of this started with Abraham till he was, I think it was 85. When he was 85 years old, he was called by God. So if you're sitting here and you're less than 85 years old, you may just be at the beginning of God's journey for you. God calls a lot of people to do things at a very ripe old age, or what we would call a ripe old age. He may call you at 75 years old. He may call you at 80 years old. He may call you at 85. He may have something for you to do, just like he did with Abraham. And so I just think that sometimes we discount the people that are older because our bodies wear out and we groan, okay? But that doesn't mean, I'm sure Abraham's been groaning for 80 years, okay? He was probably groaning from the time he was 85 years old. 90 years. I'm sure he groaned for 90 years, but he had a job to do, and he did it. God called him at that age to do that. And then it says in verse 9, then his sons Isaac and Ishmael, so they were together. Remember where Isaac is at here, okay? Isaac is in I can never say it. This is where Isaac is at. Beer Lahai Roi, okay? This is where Ishmael is at too. So they're in a very similar geographical area to each other here at this point in time. And it says here that Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, same place Sarah was buried, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, facing Mamre. Remember last time, Abraham bought this place. He paid for it. So since Abraham now owns it, it makes sense that they will be buried there. And like we said last week, so will Isaac and Leah, or Isaac and Rebekah will be buried there as well, or buried there as well. The field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth, there Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah. So at this monument here, which is the cave of the patriarchs, which is still there, this is where they're all buried. This is where their family is buried at. And it says in verse 11, and we'll just go on. I was going to stop there, but we can go on a little bit further. It came about after the death of, and I don't know if you have this slide or not.
Yeah,
you have this one? Okay. And it came about after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac lived by Beer Lahai Roi. I've got to learn how to pronounce that because it comes up all the time. Now these are the generations of Ishmael. Notice how it jumps from Isaac. It says God blessed Isaac, but these are the generations of Ishmael. Okay? There's a specific reason I think this is here at this point. Now these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto Abraham. And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael, by their names according to their generations, the firstborn of Ishmael, Nebujosh, and Kedar, and Adbeel, and Mizbam, and Mishpah, and Dumah, and Massa, Hadar, and Tamah, Jeter, Nephish, and Kedemah. Those are the 12 tribes of Ishmael. Just like we have the 12 tribes of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, these are the 12 tribes of Ishmael. Do you remember the promise? God promised when Abraham sent Ishmael out of his house, he said, I will make him a great nation. That's what this is showing us right here. He did make him a great nation. He made him the 12 tribes of Ishmael and turned them into a great nation. And it says in verse 16, these are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their towns and by their castles, 12 princes according to their nations. It's saying they have castles. This is their town. They're princes. This is kingdoms. And these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people. Gave up the ghost is an interesting term to use here for Ishmael, because we always think of Ishmael as being the wrong son, the wrong way, but still blessed by God. So he gave up the ghost. And they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, that is before Egypt, as thou goest towards Assyria, and he died in the presence of all of his brethren. He died similar to the way Abraham died. He died with his brethren. And I think we go back to Genesis chapter 17, which is your next slide. This is a promise fulfilled. In Genesis 17, it says, Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you will be the father of a multitude of nations. Abraham is the father of Isaac and Ishmael, which is a multitude of nations. Okay? No longer shall you be named Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations, and I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. The reason they have inserted Ishmael here, right after Abraham's death, is to say, I am going to bless Isaac, and I'm going to make Isaac a great nation, and look at the great nation that I've made of Ishmael, and I promised you that I would, and I did. What God is showing us is that he keeps his promises to the third and the fourth and the fifth generation. It doesn't matter how many generations go by. God keeps his promises. If there's anything that we take away from this study so far, is that God makes promises and God keeps his promises. And he promises all of these people something, and he's keeping those promises all the way through Genesis. And he keeps his promise to us too. And that's that if you believe and trust in my son Jesus Christ, then you will have eternal life. That's his promise to us. If he kept his promise to all of these people, he will certainly keep his promise to us as well. Questions or comments?
Nope.
We got it?
Overwhelming, maybe?
Huh?
Overwhelming, maybe?
Overwhelming? Just remember, probably the biggest takeaway, like I just said, of Genesis so far, God had a plan. God made promises that were in line with that plan, and he kept them all. He's kept all of his promises so far.